All right, funky shirt Sundays. This week's reflection actually just comes more about this morning. And I woke up and I was laying in bed after a busy day yesterday, loads of thoughts going on in my mind. And I've been really good actually recently of waking up, and almost one of the first things I'm doing in the morning without even opening my eyes is trying to do some sort of meditative practice, no matter for how long, like even a few seconds. Some days I've been like focusing on like the breathing in my stomach. Some days I've been focusing on trying to do a body scan. Today, for an interesting change, I went back to an old meditation style that I used to do quite a lot a few years ago from this app called Balance. And on their advanced plan, they've got like on their fourth level of their advanced plan, they've got this meditation style which is around holding your attention on a particular thought after you notice it. So a thought arises, you notice it, hold your attention on that thought and do various things with it. And in this plan, throughout the course of like 10 lessons, they go through teaching you how to accept that thought, welcome it, maybe label it past or future. Other things they'll do is allow you to notice a thought, let go of it, allow you to notice a thought and explore what's the underlying emotion below the thought. So, okay, I had this thought about reliving this memory from yesterday. Is the underlying emotion worry or pride, excitement? And that's quite an interesting step. And then for challenging thoughts, there's a little bit of I don't know if it comes from like acceptance therapy. I believe it's called ACT or something like that. But there's this element in the plan where they talk about if this thought was something a friend was saying to you, how would you respond? You kind of can have this weird internal conversation with your mind. Anyway, I did this practice it's kind of in like different forms of all of the above this morning. And it just got me reflecting on the uniqueness of this style of meditation. I don't know where it really roots from or where it stems from. This idea that when a thought arises, rather than simply let it go, like some traditions tell you to do, like in TM, you're naturally just like kind of letting a thought go and then bringing attention back to the mantra. In mindfulness, perhaps the same to the breath, the body scan. Here it almost feels like what you're doing is honing in on that singular thought and engaging with it in your own mind. Almost in like a sort of, I don't know if it comes from like modern psychology or like a therapeutic sense almost, because you're, rather than the idea being to train your attention on the return, so AKA thought arises, I'm training my attention to return back to where I want it to be, my breath. In that process, I guess I'm ignoring said thought, whatever the contents of it are. So something like attention training practices or anchoring practices maybe have the ability to sharpen my concentration on things, and even it doesn't have to be my breath, it could be like an object like this, a leaf, where certain techniques I think can strengthen my concentration. They often don't engage with the contents of your mind, and maybe for good reason, because sometimes the mind can be quite irrational. It kind of it wanders a lot. It's very it's overly protective, so it generates a lot of fearful thoughts. So I guess we don't want to take everything it sends quite literally. So in some scenarios, not having to engage with every single thought is helpful. But I find when I did this practice this morning, and when I was doing this plan as my main meditation style for a while, there's something really nice here, because for me at least, I remember having more space in my head, if that makes sense. Like, I think all meditation techniques allow in some way or the other an increase in headspace. But I felt like the ability to hone in on a thought in a practice and do various things to understand it, labeling it past or future, understanding the underlying emotion below it, separating yourself from that emotion. That's actually one thing this plan does that I forgot to mention, which is, say you have a thought, okay, yesterday I said this comment. Step 1, notice. Step 2, maybe accept. Step 3, what's the underlying emotion below it? Maybe if it's worry, then step 4 is distancing yourself from, instead of saying I am worried, you say I am experiencing worry. Kind of thus creating this gap between you and this thought. And it kind of externalizes it, but also for me, makes it something that can pass quicker. And I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting because we're engaging with the mind a bit. You know, it's like maybe this style of meditation technique feels closer to like journaling or therapy. And it does require an element of concentration to be able to hold my attention on that thought for this long and then be able to explore it in this way. But personally, the benefits I found, I remember when doing this practice thinking that, like that gap between myself and a reaction was longer. And that's not always the case in other practices. I think if I just train concentration on a leaf, for example, I don't have that same level of like spaciousness in my head, at the moment at least. So where my concentration at work would be like amazing and it's really improved from this practice, it doesn't necessarily give me that sense of like headspace, lightness, clarity. And probably even beyond all those words, because I feel like I don't want to just say buzzwords for the sake of saying buzzwords. So I'm trying to think about what actually feels unique about this. It feels maybe there's more like, there's less internal friction, if that's the best way, because what I'm not doing is I'm not ignoring my thoughts or the root causes as to why they're generating. And it's quite accepting of thoughts, it feels like, this approach, as opposed to others techniques where you're just really not paying attention to the contents of the mind and putting yourself back to said object. Here you're kind of, I think you're being a little bit more compassionate to your own mind, trying to understand why things come up in that moment. And actually the act of, when a thought comes up, rather than letting it go, moving on, and then more thoughts come up, the act of holding one thought in my mind for a bit longer almost slows down the frequency of thought generation, because I am narrowing and zoning in on this one thought. Like my torch of attention is shining on this one thought, and therefore I'm going on this exploratory process with it and not having just let it go, coming back to an object and then being subject to like way more thoughts just popping up left, right and center. It's really this journey with one thought. And therefore actually, maybe when I was meditating this morning in bed and using this technique over the space of 20 minutes, maybe even more, I probably didn't have like crazy amounts of thoughts crop up that are wildly different, because I'm actually allowing more time to sit with each one, if there's a few minutes with each one, if that makes sense. So I think there's something really interesting here, and it's something I did for a while, and then I kind of got bored of it, and I started exploring other techniques. I guess the problem with apps that I find is, especially like apps like Balance and ones where they have these sort of advanced plans, but when you get to a certain point and you've done them all, for me it's like just doing the same plan again feels quite monotonous, especially when you like almost can anticipate what the guided meditation is about to say. It doesn't feel spontaneous enough, you know, like unique enough. And then over time I've lost interest in that because of that reason. Whereas I guess now I've had a bit of separation from it. And I'm trying to think and analyze a little bit of why I liked it then and where it can add value to my sort of toolkit of different techniques. Not ignoring my thoughts is probably an interesting angle, right? Not understanding my thoughts, but also like, yeah, there's something in this idea of slowing down my thoughts or slowing down the intensity of them in some way. I don't quite know that. I haven't quite figured that part out yet. I don't even know like if this comes from a particular tradition or where Balance as an app got this from. But for me, this is like one of the best like takeaways that I've had from doing their courses. And they've got really like interesting stuff. I love the voice of one of the meditators, Ofozu, but beyond that, I think, yeah, just trying to understand where this idea of like doubling down on a thought, exploring it, allowing it to rest, sits. I think it's fascinating. Yeah, so I think I'd be keen to explore and maybe read more into if it comes from any traditional lineage from any parts of the world or if it's really this modern psychological twist on things. But I think I'm definitely going to revisit it, practice it more in the next few weeks and just play around with how my headspace feels versus some of the other techniques I've spoken about or tried. I'll keep you posted.